Did you know that one mistake could cost millions of lives? In this story, the USA decided the fate of the war in just a few days. If you're interested in the truth about World War II, subscribe and hit the like button. There are many shocking facts ahead. Imagine this. November 7th, 1943, Carpaquet Airfield near Caen, France. The skies above the English Channel had turned treacherous, clawing at aircraft with savage headwinds that devoured fuel with every passing mile. In the cockpit of his Republic P-47D Thunderbolt, Second Lieutenant William E. Roach of the 358th Fighter Squadron, 355th Fighter Group, stared anxiously at his fuel gauges as they plunged toward zero. His aircraft, affectionately nicknamed Beetle, began to sputter as its mighty Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine faltered. He was faced with a decision that would test any pilot's resolve. Behind him lay the promise of England safe, familiar, yet now heartbreakingly out of reach. Below him stretched a checkerboard of French farmland, much of it held by the enemy. And then a glimmer of hope, a distant airfield that looked just enough like the ones he had trained on. Roach committed. The Thunderbolt, heavy and powerful, descended with calm authority, its wheels touching down gently on the grassy field. He taxied behind a ground vehicle, shutting down his engine with mechanical precision. Only then did the chilling realization settle in. Nearby aircraft bore the dreaded Black Cross, the Balkenkreuz of the Luftwaffe. German troops closed in, rifles raised, surrounding the cockpit. The very men he had been fighting minutes earlier now held him prisoner. For Lieutenant Roach, the war in the skies was over. His new life would begin behind the wire at Stalag Luftwaffe. But for the German Luftwaffe, this unexpected arrival was just the beginning of a different kind of lesson one taught not in the classroom, but in the hangars and test benches of the Reich. What the Germans would uncover as they examined Beetle would leave them stunned. This was no mere aircraft. It was a mechanical thesis on American industrial might, a flying testament to a nation's manufacturing philosophy. Over the next 18 months, German engineers would pore over every inch of the captured P-47. They would dismantle it, analyze it, fly it, and in doing so, confront a truth more daunting than any dogfight. America wasn't just producing planes, it was producing an entirely different paradigm of warfare. The Thunderbolt wasn't built to dance like the nimble Focke-Wulf FW-190 or the elegant Messerschmitt Bf-109. It was forged to endure, to strike hard, to absorb punishment, and return home. It embodied a brutal logic, sheer power, rugged design, and the assumption that quantity, backed by quality, could overwhelm even the most skilled opposition. As German technicians studied this behemoth, they recognized in it a kind of industrial language they couldn't speak. Germany didn't just lag in technology, it was waging war in a separate category, one where its resources, no matter how well organized, could not match the endless tide of American production. And the truth bit deep. Tactical brilliance and superior pilot training, once the pride of the Luftwaffe, now seemed insufficient. The Thunderbolt was proof that war had shifted. From now on, machinery, materials, and manufacturing lines would speak louder than individual heroics. Yet even as German minds absorbed these hard lessons, they knew they could never apply them. There was no time, no steel, no factories left to catch up. Roach's landing that day was not the Luftwaffe's first glimpse of the P-47. Since April 1943, German pilots had been engaging the aircraft as it escorted B-17 bombers deep into occupied Europe. Early reports were full of scorn and confusion. The Thunderbolt, they claimed, was enormous, unwieldy, and clearly designed by people who knew nothing of real aerial combat. At low altitudes, it climbed poorly, it handled like a boulder, and American pilots, so it seemed, refused to fight in classic turning dogfights. But behind that contempt lay misunderstanding. German doctrine prized agility and finesse. The P-47 rewrote the rulebook. It didn't need to turn tighter or climb faster. It could dive like a meteor and hit like a hammer. And above all, it could be built by the thousands. In time, the Luftwaffe would come to respect the Thunderbolt not because it matched their style, but because it changed the very nature of air war. William Roach, in running out of fuel that November day, had delivered far more than a machine to enemy hands. He had inadvertently offered a glimpse into the future, a future the Germans were not prepared to face. The initial impressions among seasoned Luftwaffe pilots were dismissive. To them, the P-47 Thunderbolt appeared to be a crude, overweight, Bruton aircraft that could be easily outmaneuvered at the mid-altitudes where most aerial engagements took place. It seemed a textbook case of poor design, one that prioritized brute force over agility. But such judgments would soon reveal themselves to be not only mistaken, but dangerously incomplete. Buried within those same combat reports were observations that pointed to something far more disturbing, details that challenged the entire premise of American inferiority. Pilots recounted how Thunderbolts, once committed to disengagement, simply could not be caught. The moment they nosed down into a dive, they vanished, accelerating faster than any German fighter could follow. They spoke of the devastating firepower of 850 caliber machine guns that ripped through enemy aircraft when the Americans chose to fight. They noted the armor plating, almost impervious to 7.92 millimeter rounds, and at times even capable of absorbing hits from 20 millimeter cannon shells. But perhaps most unsettling of all was the aircraft's uncanny ability to survive. Thunderbolts, even when riddled with bullets, their control surfaces shredded, engines leaking oil, and wing sections missing, still managed to limp home to England. German pilots watched in disbelief as aircraft that should have been lost continued to fly under control, returning to base with damage that would have obliterated any Luftwaffe fighter. So when Lieutenant Roach's intact Thunderbolt came to a rolling stop at Carpiquet Airfield, the Luftwaffe instantly recognized the intelligence windfall they had just received. It was a rare and precious opportunity, a chance to examine in detail the machine that had frustrated their best pilots and defied their weapons. Armed guards surrounded the aircraft within hours to prevent any sabotage. The American stars and bars were quickly replaced with the black Balkenkreuz on wings and fuselage. To ensure friendly units wouldn't mistake the plane for an enemy target, standard Luftwaffe RLM 04 yellow paint was applied to the undersides and tail, a vivid warning for German flak batteries. Shortly after its capture, the Thunderbolt was earmarked for transfer to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's premier flight test center, located in Mecklenburg, about 100 kilometers northwest of Berlin. It was there that the aircraft received its new designation, T9FK, following the coding system of the Zircus Rosarius, the Luftwaffe's elite evaluation unit for captured Allied aircraft. The man chosen to fly the captured Thunderbolt was Hans Werner Lersche, Rechlin's chief engineer and test pilot. A meticulous and disciplined aviator, Lersche would go on to fly over 125 different aircraft types during the war without ever crashing or causing major damage to a single one. Lurch approached the Thunderbolt with cautious curiosity. His first inspection was documented in his personal logbook and later recounted in his memoir, Luftwaffe Test Pilot, Flying Captured Allied Aircraft of World War II. What struck him immediately was the cockpit. It was like nothing he had seen in a German fighter. The instrument panel bristled with gauges, seemingly twice as many as in a Bf-109 or FW-190. Unfamiliar levers and dials controlled systems he had never encountered in German engineering. The turbo supercharger system in particular demanded an understanding of exhaust gas flow management, a concept still largely theoretical in German aviation, but standard in American design. Even the constant speed propeller operated with controls unlike anything in German cockpits. Most puzzling of all was the automated engine management system. German pilots were used to adjusting throttle, propeller pitch, and fuel mixture manually, constantly, attentively. The P-47, by contrast, featured a level of automation that seemed almost alien. Lurch would later write, "The P-47 cockpit could baffle even an experienced pilot. I gradually managed to ascertain the function of most of the levers and instruments, but there were also some obscure controls, the meaning of which was not immediately clear to me." He spent long hours on the ground studying the layout, tracing the functions of the various controls. Without access to pilot manuals or technical documentation, every discovery had to be made by inference, trial, and engineering intuition. Even the engine startup sequence was a revelation. Bringing the 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp to life required a precise series of steps to activate the massive turbo supercharger. As the engine finally roared to life, it produced a sound like thunder contained in a metal shell, a deep, resonant rumble, completely unlike the sharp staccato of German inline engines or even the BMW 801 radial used in the FW-190. This was not just a different engine, it was a different philosophy. Lurch taxied the aircraft slowly, his hands reading the controls as one might read the limbs of a strange new creature. The P-47's weight was immediately apparent, nearly 10,000 pounds empty, with this particular specimen still holding fuel and a full ammunition load that pushed it close to 1,300 to 500 pounds. By comparison, the FW-188, one of Germany's heaviest single-engine fighters, had a maximum loaded weight of about 10,800 pounds. The Thunderbolt was immense, larger even than some twin-engine aircraft in the Luftwaffe inventory. When Lurch advanced the throttle for takeoff, he felt the difference not just in power, but in purpose. This was American engineering on full display, not elegant, not delicate, but overwhelmingly powerful, built for survivability, endurance, and mass production. In that moment, the contrast between the two air forces could not have been clearer. The Luftwaffe prized finesse and tactical advantage. The Americans, it seemed, had chosen another path, one paved with horsepower, armor, and industrial might. The R2800 engine powering the P-47 Thunderbolt was in many ways a revelation. Producing 2,000 horsepower under standard boost and up to 2,300 horsepower with water methanol injection in war emergency settings, it dwarfed anything Germany had fielded in a radial engine. The BMW 801D, the finest radial engine Germany produced and the heart of the FW-190, managed between 1,700 and 1,830 horsepower at its peak continuous output. Yet raw power alone did not translate into easy performance. When Hans-Werner Lurch initiated takeoff in the captured Thunderbolt, he quickly realized just how much mass he was trying to lift. The P-47 consumed nearly the entire length of the transfer airfield's grass strip before lifting off, its tremendous weight making itself felt from the very start. But it was once airborne that the real discoveries began. As Lursha climbed through the lower atmosphere, carefully coaxing the turbo supercharger into its operational temperature range, he found himself briefly agreeing with German combat reports. Below 15,000 feet, the Thunderbolt matched its reputation: heavy, ponderous in turns, and lacking the nimbleness of a Bf-109 or an FW-190. The rate of climb was unimpressive. Any seasoned German pilot in a contemporary fighter would have been confident in outturning the P-47 and dominating the engagement at these altitudes. And then something changed. Somewhere above 20,000 feet, the aircraft revealed a hidden nature. As the air thinned, the turbo supercharger became increasingly efficient, driving greater volumes of compressed air into the engine. While German engines struggled for oxygen, gasping as their output dropped with each 1,000 feet, the R-2800 maintained its full rated power all the way to 25,000 feet. Lursha advanced the throttle and felt the aircraft surge forward, a heavy machine suddenly filled with unexpected energy. He nosed over into a dive to test the Thunderbolt's behavior at speed, and what followed shocked him. The aircraft accelerated rapidly, tearing past 500 miles per hour in a steep descent. The controls stiffened under the intense airflow, requiring Lurch to brace himself with both hands on the stick just to maintain control. He was now entering the realm of compressibility, a mysterious aerodynamic boundary that would remain only partially understood until the jet age. Yet the Thunderbolt held together, its airframe and control surfaces enduring stresses that might have torn apart lesser aircraft. What impressed Lurch further was the roll rate. The Thunderbolt, that heavy tank-like machine, rolled more quickly than any German fighter he had flown, even the FW-190, long considered the benchmark for roll performance in the Luftwaffe. Combined with its blistering dive speed, this capability granted the P-47 a tactical escape maneuver that no German aircraft could match. A high-altitude Thunderbolt could simply roll inverted and dive away from danger, reaching speeds where German fighters would falter, plagued by compressibility issues and structural limitations the American design had clearly overcome. Lurch continued his evaluation through a full test regimen at Rechlin, flying the aircraft systematically through its performance envelope. His early reports caused unease at Luftwaffe headquarters, which still clung to the belief in the inherent superiority of German fighter design. But above 25,000 feet, the very ceiling where Allied bombers increasingly operated to evade flak, the Thunderbolt was not just competitive, it was superior in key areas that negated traditional German advantages in agility and rate of climb. Over the following weeks, Rechlin's engineers subjected the captured P-47, nicknamed Beetle, to an exhaustive series of inspections. Following Erprobungsstelle protocols, they photographed every surface, measured every structural element, weighed each assembly with precision, and analyzed system performance across operational conditions. Unsurprisingly, the turbo supercharger drew their special attention. It was, after all, the technological heart of the Thunderbolt's high-altitude dominance, and a system with no real counterpart in German aircraft. What they uncovered stunned the German engineers, particularly those steeped in the austerity of wartime production. The R2800 was a marvel of industrial engineering. Its 18 cylinders were arranged in 2 staggered rows around a central crankshaft, yielding a displacement of 2,104.5 cubic inches, nearly 46 liters. By comparison, the BMW 801D displaced 2,560 cubic inches, or 41.8 liters. But it was not just size that mattered. The Americans had achieved something greater: materials and manufacturing that set a new standard. Forged aluminum alloy pistons, sodium-cooled exhaust valves to withstand extreme heat, a crankshaft fashioned from high-grade steel alloy that German metallurgists could only admire and envy. They noted with growing unease that the alloys used in the R2800 were of a quality now beyond Germany's reach. The war had drained access to such materials, and it wasn't only the materials, it was the precision. Every component examined bore the hallmark of exacting manufacturing standards. Tolerances were tight. Fit and finish were exceptional. The Thunderbolt was not just a brute force solution. It was the culmination of an industrial machine capable of producing war material at scale without sacrificing complexity or quality. What the Luftwaffe discovered in that captured aircraft was not simply a superior machine. It was a window into the vast, relentless capacity of American industry, a force that Germany, for all its tactical ingenuity, could not hope to match. Surface finishes on the P-47's components were uniformly smooth, displaying a level of manufacturing consistency that reflected both industrial discipline and material abundance. German engineers examining the engine quickly realized they were dealing with parts made from materials increasingly out of reach for their own industry. The magnetos incorporated alloys and insulators that were now classified as strategic in the Reich. The spark plugs used high-grade ceramics that surpassed German equivalents in both heat resistance and durability. The fuel injection system operated with a precision that astonished the inspection team. Its reliability and construction quality more in line with scientific instrumentation than with the rugged hardware expected to survive battlefield conditions. What stood out most starkly was not just what the engine included, but what it did not. There was no evidence of shortcuts, substitutions, or design compromises. No emergency changes in metallurgy. No signs of corners cut to meet production quotas. This was an engine built as originally intended, using every material precisely as specified, in direct contrast to German engines, which by 1943 bore the unmistakable scars of compromise. Steel where aluminum had once been, castings roughened by declining foundry standards, and structural fatigue resulting from inferior alloys. The turbo supercharger system represented the pinnacle of this American technological advantage. German aviation had theorized similar solutions and indeed had pursued experimental development of such systems, but they had never succeeded in deploying them operationally. The American system was breathtakingly complex, yet flawlessly executed. Exhaust gases from all 18 cylinders were collected via precisely engineered manifolds and routed through insulated ducts along both sides of the fuselage, leading to a turbine unit mounted aft and beneath the cockpit. That turbine, spun at incredible velocity by the superheated exhaust, drove a centrifugal compressor that force-fed air into the engine's main supercharger. This entire system was augmented by an intercooler, which reduced the temperature of the compressed air to prevent pre-ignition and increase oxygen density. Most impressive of all was the automation. Regulators that managed turbine RPM and a boost pressure, requiring only that the pilot set the manifold pressure and fly the aircraft. For German engineers, who were accustomed to constant manual throttle, mixture, and propeller management, this level of system autonomy was astonishing. They understood the theory. They had studied it, tested it, even flown prototype aircraft with primitive versions. But to build such a system at scale required exotic heat-resistant alloys, seamless insulation materials, and an array of machine components, each of which had to perform under conditions ranging from sub-zero temperatures at high altitude to searing heat near the engine core. Add in vibration, shock, and battle damage, and the challenge became immense. Yet the Americans had not only solved these problems, they had done so to such a degree that the system could be installed on every production aircraft without hesitation. This was not limited to a few elite units. This was not field-modified equipment. This was standard. Every Thunderbolt rolled off the line with the turbo supercharger as a core feature. For the German engineers at Rechlin, this was the most sobering realization. They were not just facing a technologically advanced adversary, they were confronting an industrial machine that could mass-produce sophistication without flinching. The German evaluation report concluded that the turbo supercharger system alone represented a level of complexity and production mastery beyond Germany's reach. Even if the designs could be replicated, and there was little doubt that German engineers had the theoretical ability, the required materials were either in short supply or unavailable. Precision manufacturing on this scale required a stable, undisturbed industrial base, not one fractured by Allied bombing raids and reliant increasingly on forced labor with insufficient training. In short, the system was beyond Germany's capacity, not because it couldn't be understood, but because it couldn't be built. And then there was the matter of firepower. The P-47D bristled with 8 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, 4 mounted in each wing. German fighters typically carried mixed armament, often 4 machine guns paired with 1 or 2 20mm cannons, or 6 machine guns in earlier models. The American choice to mount 8 heavy machine guns was not accidental. It was a conscious design philosophy. Maximize firepower, even if it meant additional structural weight, wing loading, and ammunition complexity. Each gun had its own ammunition box built directly into the wing, each holding 425 rounds, bringing the total onboard loadout to 3,400 rounds. In contrast, the FW-1-Natae's standard loadout included about 2,000 rounds for its machine guns and around 500 for its cannons. A P-47 pilot could fire all 8 guns simultaneously for roughly 20 seconds before expending the entire magazine, with a combined rate of fire approaching 100 rounds per second. The effects in combat were devastating. A short burst from a Thunderbolt could shred enemy aircraft, especially lightly constructed German fighters. American doctrine did not prioritize nimble dogfighting. It focused on delivering overwhelming firepower in quick, decisive strikes. German pilots who once mocked the Thunderbolt as bloated and awkward had failed to understand the role it was built to perform and the sheer volume of destruction it could unleash in seconds. In this, too, the Germans saw a reflection of American industrial logic. Where they optimized every design for efficiency, minimized weight, and sought the ideal balance of capability and economy, the Americans had chosen abundance, redundancy, force. They had the materials, the machines, and the workforce to build such weapons not just once, but tens of thousands of times. And they did. when all 8 of the Thunderbolt's Browning .50 caliber machine guns were harmonized to converge their firepower at a single point in space, the result was devastating. German test pilots and armament officers conducting live fire trials of the captured aircraft recorded the sheer destructive force of a full salvo as overwhelming. The volume of lead thrown toward a target in less than 2 seconds could tear through airframes, shred control surfaces, and ignite fuel tanks. The quality of the installation itself did not go unnoticed. Each gun was mounted in an electrically heated bay, a thoughtful engineering solution to prevent freezing at high altitudes, where temperatures routinely dropped below -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Spent shell casings and disintegrating belt links were efficiently channeled through ejection ports beneath the wings, eliminating the risk of debris damaging the aircraft or interfering with control surfaces. The system operated with flawless reliability throughout testing at Rechlin. Thousands of rounds were fired in varying conditions without a single recorded instance of jamming or feed malfunction. This level of dependability impressed German armament specialists, many of whom were grappling with the deteriorating reliability of their own systems due to resource constraints and production pressures. Even the ammunition told a story. American .50 caliber rounds featured armor-piercing cores, incendiary elements, and tracer compounds, all manufactured to consistent specifications and functioning with dependable uniformity. German engineers, facing declining quality in their own ammunition supplies, acknowledged that American rounds ignited more reliably, penetrated more effectively, and burned with greater predictability. The Thunderbolt's armor protection provided another lesson in industrial priorities. Where German designers focused on minimizing weight to enhance performance, American engineers had willingly accepted added mass to increase pilot survivability. The cockpit was surrounded by a network of heavy steel plates. The pilot sat inside what American designers referred to as an armored bathtub, shielded from below and from behind. The windscreen featured a thick, bullet-resistant glass panel capable of stopping standard machine gun fire and absorbing fragmentation from cannon shells. Critical systems such as the oil coolers and the turbo supercharger were also protected by dedicated armor plating. Altogether, the aircraft carried over 200 pounds of armor, a weight roughly equivalent to adding 2 more machine guns with full ammunition. In contrast, German fighters typically sacrificed protection to preserve performance, accepting higher pilot casualty rates as an unavoidable reality. The divergence in philosophy between the two air forces became particularly clear in matters of field maintenance. American engineers had clearly anticipated the needs of mechanics operating under combat conditions, possibly at night, in bad weather, under enemy attack. Every major system on the P-47 was accessible through generously sized panels secured by quick-release fasteners. Mechanics needed only simple tools to reach critical components. The massive R-2800 engine could be removed and replaced within hours, using standard lifting equipment and well-documented procedures. German fighters, in contrast, were not designed with this level of maintainability in mind. Major repairs typically required partial disassembly of the airframe and access to factory-level support, a reflection of a production system shaped by scarcity and short-term operational thinking. American abundance made room for long-term operational efficiency. German austerity could not. The aircraft's radio systems provided further evidence of technological maturity. The captured P-47 was equipped with both an SCR-274N command radio, supporting air-to-air and air-to-ground communication, and an SCR-5115A liaison radio, offering additional channels for coordination. German test personnel were struck by the clarity, range, and reliability of these systems. German radio sets, increasingly plagued by signal interference and component degradation, simply could not match the American standard. Equally significant was the integration of an identification friend or foe, IFF, system, an automated transponder that identified the aircraft to Allied radar and ground controllers, reducing the risk of friendly fire. This level of operational integration was unmatched by German systems in 1943 and spoke to a broader level of coordination between aircraft, command centers, and defensive networks. Ultimately, what impressed German engineers the most was not any single innovation or technology. It was the cumulative effect of everything. Every wire, every bracket, every bolt. The aircraft appeared as though each component had been designed to be the best possible version of itself, free of compromise, free of substitution, free of desperation. Nothing on the P-47 bore the telltale signs of a nation under siege. There were no ersatz materials, no hastily reworked systems, no design features obviously altered to cope with shortages or the collapse of industrial logistics. The technical reports compiled at Rechlin and distributed through the Luftwaffe's technical services returned to this point again and again. American industrial capacity had enabled a standard of engineering, production consistency, and technological integration that Germany by 1943 could no longer realistically aspire to match. The Thunderbolt was not just a fighter. It was a symbol of industrial power, a machine that embodied the material superiority of its creators in every rivet, circuit, and seam. The P-47 Thunderbolt had been constructed precisely as its designers intended, every component, material, and process faithfully executed without evidence of compromise or degradation. For the engineers at Rechlin, this level of manufacturing integrity stood in stark contrast to what was increasingly unachievable within Germany by late 1943. As raw materials dwindled and as Allied bombing campaigns shredded the industrial infrastructure of the Reich, German production was plagued by forced improvisation and steadily declining quality. The Thunderbolt, on the other hand, remained a symbol of undiminished material abundance and industrial discipline. Flight testing continued throughout the winter of 1943 and into the early months of 1944, with new examples of the aircraft arriving for evaluation. On May 29, 1944, another opportunity fell into German hands when Second Lieutenant Lloyd S. Hathcock of the 301st Fighter Squadron lost his bearings during a ferry flight and inadvertently landed at the German-controlled Rome Littorio airfield in Italy. His aircraft, serial number 4275971, had previously been flown by George Novotny, an 8 Victory Ace of the 317th Fighter Squadron. German forces seized the plane immediately and transported it to Rechlin, where it was initially labeled 8+6. Later, on October 12, 1944, it was transferred to the Zircus Rosarius Demonstration Unit and redesignated T9+LK. The accumulation of data at Rechlin soon translated into tactical guidance for frontline Luftwaffe fighter units. Briefing documents advised German pilots to engage Thunderbolts below 15,000 feet, where the American aircraft's heavy weight and limited climb rate left it most vulnerable. At these altitudes, German fighters retained their familiar advantages in maneuverability and acceleration. However, the reports issued a specific warning: never attempt to escape a P-47 by diving. The American fighter, with its robust airframe and superior dive characteristics, would simply accelerate beyond reach, leaving pursuers struggling in its wake. Pilots were also cautioned not to assume a P-47 was out of the fight after a few hits. Reports confirmed that damaged Thunderbolts frequently returned to base despite battle damage that would have brought down any German fighter. Successful engagements required pressing the attack to completion with focused fire-glancing blows were rarely sufficient. Still, such tactical recommendations, while helpful on an individual level, could do little to offset the broader strategic crisis Germany now faced. Germany was fighting a war of attrition it could not win. The Americans, by mid-war, were producing P-47s at a rate of over 300 per month. Each destroyed aircraft was rapidly replaced. Training programs churned out new pilots in quantities Germany could not match. Luftwaffe pilot training had been compressed, flight hours reduced due to fuel shortages, and the overall quality of replacements was falling. Meanwhile, American logistics delivered fuel, ammunition, and spare parts with mechanical regularity uninterrupted by enemy action, while German supply chains collapsed under the weight of Allied air supremacy. Eventually, the captured Thunderbolts were handed over to the Wunderzirkus Rosarius, the Luftwaffe's special demonstration unit, led by Flugkapitän Theodor Rosarius. This mobile unit visited operational bases throughout occupied Europe, allowing Luftwaffe pilots to see Allied aircraft up close, study their silhouettes, and understand their flight characteristics. The purpose was both educational and psychological. Pilots needed to be able to recognize enemy aircraft quickly in combat, but they also witnessed firsthand that these machines were often superior to their own, particularly at high altitudes. Post-war interviews with German pilots who attended Zirkus Rosarius demonstrations revealed the impact these encounters had on morale. While Luftwaffe instructors emphasized that German fighters still maintained advantages at lower altitudes and in close combat, the demonstrations made one fact painfully clear. At the altitudes where American bomber formations operated, often above 25,000 feet, German fighters were at a distinct and growing disadvantage. The Thunderbolts, and later the Mustangs, possessed performance capabilities that their German counterparts could not match at those heights. The intelligence gathered from testing and operational analysis dismantled many of the optimistic assumptions that had circulated earlier in the Luftwaffe's strategic planning. Raw performance data drove the point home with finality. At sea level, the P-47D topped out at around 350 miles per hour, noticeably slower than the FW-190A, which could exceed 400 miles per hour. At 10,000 feet, the Thunderbolt reached approximately 375 MPST, still lagging behind. But at 30,000 feet, the tables turned. The P-47 hit 426 miles per hour, while the Focke-Wulf plateaued near 370 mph, and the Bf-109G barely managed 385. In the environment that increasingly defined air combat high above flak and below contrails, the Thunderbolt was not just holding its own. It was dominating. Service ceiling comparisons deepened the concern. The P-47 Thunderbolt could reach 42,000 feet. German fighters, designed for lower altitude performance, rarely operated effectively beyond 35,000 feet and suffered steep declines in power and agility the higher they climbed. American bombers protected by high-flying Thunderbolts could now operate at heights where German interceptors could barely function. And if they managed to reach those heights, they often arrived with depleted energy reserves, unable to fight with any meaningful effectiveness. To the Luftwaffe, it became increasingly clear that their adversary was not merely a well-trained air force, it was a nation whose immense industrial capacity had become a weapon all its own. The P-47 was not just a fighter, it was the airborne embodiment of American power, heavy, complex, survivable, and replaceable. It fought in a way that mirrored the war America was fighting at scale, with overwhelming force and with an eye toward strategic endurance. German engineers and pilots alike recognized this, and they knew they were facing not just a superior machine, but a system of war production they could neither match nor outlast. The P-47 Thunderbolts, when flying escort missions, operated with full confidence at altitudes that sapped the strength from German fighters. They maintained complete combat effectiveness, their turbo superchargers supplying power at heights where Luftwaffe aircraft struggled for breath. But altitude was only one aspect of their superiority. Range comparisons further revealed the depth of American advantage, not just technical, but logistical. By 1944, the Thunderbolt's operational range had increased dramatically. Equipped with 108-gallon drop tanks, the P-47D could accompany bombers on missions that penetrated deep into German airspace, often exceeding 1,000 miles round trip. Early P-47 models had been hampered by limited fuel capacity, but successive upgrades eliminated that flaw. In contrast, German fighters, optimized for point defense interception, lacked the fuel capacity for prolonged engagements. The Luftwaffe was thus restricted to defensive operations, bound to fight close to home, while the Americans could project power at times and locations of their choosing. The captured Thunderbolts also offered a window into American pilot training and tactical doctrine. Analysis of gun camera footage and damage patterns from surviving aircraft revealed that U.S. pilots consistently flew in ways that maximized their strengths. They rarely attempted turning dogfights at low altitude, a situation that favored the lighter, more maneuverable German aircraft. Instead, they used altitude as their ally. They dove to attack with speed, then zoomed away, relying on the Thunderbolt's superior diving performance and engine power at high altitudes. Tactically, American pilots operated in disciplined formations, pairs or four-ship elements that emphasized mutual support. They passed up tempting opportunities for individual combat in favor of group cohesion. To many Luftwaffe veterans who reviewed the footage, this discipline was startling. German combat culture, especially among experienced aces, emphasized personal initiative and aggressive solo action. In contrast, the Americans followed doctrine rigorously, and that doctrine worked. With superior high-altitude aircraft, better numbers, and coordinated execution, the Americans began to overwhelm even Germany's most skilled pilots. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June 1944, the strategic balance had shifted so dramatically that even detailed intelligence on Allied aircraft, tactics, and production capabilities offered little practical help to the Luftwaffe. The captured P-47s had revealed much, but knowledge alone could not compensate for Germany's collapsing industrial base, growing fuel shortages, and the widening gap in trained personnel. The Rechlin evaluations, meticulously compiled and distributed across Luftwaffe technical departments, now served as grim documentation of a war Germany was no longer capable of winning. The final blow came in the numbers. By war's end, over 125,000 Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engines had been produced, a single engine type exceeding the total output of all German combat aircraft engines combined. BMW, for all its engineering talent, had produced approximately 61,000 examples of the BMW 801 radial engine. The Daimler-Benz DB605, Germany's most produced inline engine, totaled around 42,400 units. The scale of American production was staggering. It wasn't just the number of aircraft or engines, it was the rate, the reliability, and the relentless delivery of replacement machines, pilots, and supplies. Against this backdrop, even the most advanced German technology struggled to matter. In every captured Thunderbolt, German engineers saw the same pattern: not a miracle weapon, but a system built without compromise, fielded in overwhelming numbers, and supported by a global logistics engine. The Luftwaffe, for all its tactical brilliance and engineering creativity, was being crushed by something far more impersonal and unstoppable: industrial total war. By 1944, the disparity between American and German aircraft production had grown so vast that it redefined the very nature of strategic air power. American industry, in that single year alone, produced approximately 96,000 aircraft. Of those, 38,000 were fighters, 16,000 were heavy bombers, and thousands more included medium bombers, transport aircraft, reconnaissance platforms, and advanced trainers. In contrast, Germany, under siege both physically and economically, managed to produce only about 25,000 aircraft of all types. When combined with British and Soviet outputs, the Allies outproduced the Axis in aircraft by more than 5-1. This overwhelming advantage in numbers was not simply a matter of headcount. It was the result of a fundamental difference in industrial architecture. The United States had constructed an economy of war on a scale the Axis powers could not match. The Aluminum Company of America alone outproduced the entirety of Germany's aluminum industry. Individual American steel plants exceeded the total output of the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland, which itself had become a primary target for Allied bombers. Vehicle factories in the United States operated on moving assembly lines, high-efficiency production streams honed by decades of automotive manufacturing, while German plants remained reliant on labor-intensive batch production. Even the machine tools required to build the jigs and presses that shaped aircraft were produced in such volume that the United States could afford to supply not only its own sprawling arsenal, but also to equip its British and Soviet allies. American industrial power did not merely produce weapons, it produced the tools that enabled the mass production of those weapons. In this context, the captured P-47 Thunderbolts served not only as test subjects, but as industrial case studies. One such aircraft, serial T9+FK, formerly Lieutenant William Roach's Beetle, was eventually recovered by American troops in Göttingen in May 1945. It was found among a surreal collection of Allied aircraft parked beside wrecked FW-190s and BF-109s, remnants of the Luftwaffe's once vaunted evaluation program. Photographs from that period show Beetles still bearing traces of German markings, a strange hybrid of identities, standing as silent testimony to the extraordinary journey it had taken, from American warbird to enemy test subject, and finally to captured artifact. The Thunderbolts that passed through the hands of the Luftwaffe's engineers and pilots had fulfilled their unintended role. They educated the German military on a scale of industrial warfare that could not be reversed or replicated. In those final months of the war, the lessons they offered arrived too late to matter. The machines themselves embodied a different philosophy, not of elegant restraint, but of overwhelming capability. American engineers had designed with the knowledge that every demand, no matter how ambitious, could be met with the resources at their disposal. The result was not always the most efficient or lightweight solution, but it was effective, rugged, and could be produced by the tens of thousands. This philosophy was evident across the entire American aircraft inventory. The B-17 Flying Fortress, with its quartet of turbo-supercharged Wright Cyclone engines, demonstrated a long-range strategic bombing capacity that Germany had never been able to field. The P-51 Mustang, a fusion of American airframe design and the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, redefined air superiority, becoming what many historians still regard as the most capable piston-engine fighter of the war. The P-38 Lightning, with its twin-boom layout, turbocharged engines, and tricycle landing gear, showed a willingness to experiment with unconventional designs to solve mission-specific challenges. Each of these aircraft told the same story, not of perfect design, but of sufficient design, backed by a virtually limitless engine of production. The Americans were not winning in the air because of mystical pilot skill or revolutionary tactics, though their training programs were effective and their doctrine sound. They were winning because they had redefined how wars were fought. Luftwaffe analysts saw the evidence clearly. They were being overtaken not by brilliance, but by abundance, not by superior strategy, but by systemic capacity. By late 1943, internal Luftwaffe assessments reflected this realization. Germany had entered the war with arguably the most advanced air force in the world. Its aircraft were exceptional, its pilots among the best trained, and its tactics honed through years of practical combat experience. In one-on-one encounters, German fighters like the Bf-109 and Fw-190 could still match or even outperform their Allied counterparts under specific conditions. But war had changed. The air war was no longer defined by isolated duels between aces. It was now fought by formations of hundreds of aircraft, guided by radar, supported by logistics networks, and replenished from vast industrial backbones. The Americans had built a war machine designed to exploit every advantage of that new reality. Germany, in contrast, was trying to maintain qualitative superiority in an environment where quantity, sustained, massive, and organized, had become the deciding factor. And no matter how sophisticated their tactics or how capable their engineers, the Luftwaffe could no longer close the gap. The captured P-47s, once studied so intently at Rechlin and displayed across Europe by Zircus Rosarius, became the most tangible symbols of a truth that could no longer be denied. The age of technological overmatch was ending. The age of industrial dominance had begun. But German industry, for all its ingenuity, simply could not sustain its early advantages when confronted by adversaries with industrial capacity on a different planetary scale. American aircraft production did not just increase, it doubled again and again, first in 1940, then in 1941, again in 1942, and it kept growing. By 1944, American factories were turning out over 96,000 aircraft in a single year, a number Germany never even approached. Despite frantic attempts to boost production, German output never exceeded 40,000 aircraft annually, and as quantity surged, so too did quality. In 1942, German aircraft often maintained a clear edge over their American counterparts. Their fighters were faster, more agile, better armed. But by 1944, that advantage had disappeared. American designs caught up, and then began to surpass. By 1945, the gap was no longer narrow. It had become an abyss. The United States fielded fighters like the P-47N and P-51H, evolved, refined, and optimized versions of proven platforms, backed by boundless resources and continuous technological innovation. Germany, by contrast, was producing desperate last-ditch designs like the Ta-152, machines born out of necessity, built under the shadow of strategic bombing, with dwindling supplies of essential materials and assembled by a workforce increasingly composed of exhausted or untrained forced labor. The psychological toll of this imbalance was profound. Luftwaffe pilots who had once seen themselves as elite warriors now felt like cogs in a hopeless battle of attrition. No matter how skillfully they flew, no matter how many enemy aircraft they downed, more American planes filled the sky the next day. Fresh squadrons, well-maintained, well-fueled, and flown by pilots who, if lost, were swiftly and effectively replaced. The sky was no longer a contest of equals. It had become a conveyor belt of destruction, and the Germans were the ones being fed into it. This grim realization spread like a shadow across the Luftwaffe during 1944. Morale suffered, confidence eroded. The belief that tactical brilliance could offset strategic weakness began to wither under the relentless pressure of American numbers and consistency. The captured P-47s, dissected, flown, examined, were the physical proof. These were not rumors, not the inventions of Allied propaganda. They were real aircraft, standing in German hangars, running on real engines, delivering real performance. And they were not miracle machines. The Thunderbolt wasn't some fantastical leap in aviation design. It was, quite simply, a very good aircraft, thoughtfully engineered, well-armed, thoroughly protected, and built with every material its designers had specified. It was built in such numbers that no tactical brilliance could stem the tide. American design philosophy did not chase perfection in every detail. It pursued sufficiency, repeatability, and reliability, and it pursued those things with overwhelming force. The final historical irony lies in the German response. The Luftwaffe Technical Services learned the lesson in full. They documented it thoroughly. They analyzed the Thunderbolt, the Mustang, the Lightning, and the Flying Fortress with clinical precision. They understood what they were facing, but knowledge did not translate into capacity. Understanding the turbo supercharger did not produce the alloys needed to build it. Knowing the P-47 strengths did not create fuel, aluminum, precision tools, or skilled mechanics. When American forces captured Rechlin and its related facilities in May 1945, they uncovered a vast archive, thousands of pages of technical reports, performance graphs, material analyses, and combat evaluations. Every American and British aircraft that had fallen into German hands had been studied with a degree of rigor that impressed even the American technical intelligence teams reviewing the data. These post-war assessments acknowledged a remarkable irony. In some cases, German engineers had a clearer, more detailed understanding of American aircraft performance than many American combat commanders themselves. German engineers had identified structural weaknesses, handling limitations, and system vulnerabilities that U.S. pilots had learned to work around instinctively. The reports were rich in insight, filled with precise measurements and careful comparisons. But ultimately, they also told a deeper story, one that lay between the lines. Germany had fought a modern industrial war with an industrial base that was never built for such a contest. In the early years, German victories had come from superior training, inventive tactics, and high-quality engineering. These strengths had been enough against enemies similarly constrained. But when the United States entered the war, bringing with it an economy larger than all Axis powers combined, the equation changed. Against an adversary who could build not just thousands of aircraft, but the factories to build tens of thousands more, no amount of pilot skill or engineering elegance could alter the outcome. Germany had built great machines, but the United States built more, and in the end, it was not brilliance, but scale, not genius, but capacity, that decided the air war over Europe. The story of German engineers meticulously studying captured P-47 Thunderbolts stands today as a striking case study in the brutal arithmetic of industrialized warfare as it had evolved by the Second World War. The Thunderbolt did not dominate the skies because it was the best fighter in every technical category. It succeeded because it was good enough in all the right ways, and because it was produced in such overwhelming numbers that any isolated examples of enemy technical superiority became strategically meaningless. American industry didn't just build the Thunderbolt, it built 15,083 of them, and at the same time it constructed 5,486 P-51 Mustangs, 10,037 P-38 Lightnings, 13,038 F-6F Hellcats, and 12,571 F-4U Corsairs. Total American fighter production during the war exceeded 70,000 aircraft, each one representing thousands of hours of skilled labor, tons of aluminum and steel, and the use of precision components in quantities that Germany could not even dream of matching. To Luftwaffe pilots, the Thunderbolt became a symbol not just of American air power, but of something deeper, industrial dominance. They adopted the same nickname used by American crews, the Jug, an ironic term of endearment for the aircraft's bulky appearance. Others called it Indiana, a nod to the Thunderbird insignias painted on many engine cowlings. But in time, especially as losses mounted and morale declined, many simply referred to it as that 8-gun fighter, a name that said as much about its lethality as about its identity. Through grim experience, German pilots learned to avoid combat with Thunderbolts above 20,000 feet, where the turbo supercharger gave the American aircraft a decisive performance edge. By war's end, P-47 Thunderbolts had destroyed an estimated 3,452 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat. Against that, approximately 3,499 Thunderbolts were lost to all causes, including mechanical failure, training accidents, operational mishaps, and ground fire. At first glance, the loss ratio may appear unremarkable, but context is everything. From mid-1944 onward, the majority of Thunderbolts served not as interceptors, but in the far more hazardous role of ground attack aircraft. They operated at low altitude, facing withering anti-aircraft fire daily. In their original fighter escort role, particularly during high-altitude engagements in 1943 and early 1944, Thunderbolts achieved far more favorable kill ratios, capitalizing on the engine performance advantage their turbo superchargers delivered in thin air. The transition to the ground attack mission, rather than diminishing the Thunderbolt's legacy, revealed a powerful new dimension of American design philosophy, one rooted in flexibility and versatility. As the longer-ranged P-51 Mustang gradually took over bomber escort duties in 1944, the U.S. 9th Air Force reassigned many Thunderbolt squadrons to close air support. The same qualities that once seemed like flaws in dogfighting, the aircraft's size, weight, and armor, suddenly became sets. Its rugged, air-cooled engine, high payload capacity, and extensive protection made the P-47 nearly ideal for low-level strike missions. Thunderbolt pilots in this role inflicted catastrophic damage on German infrastructure and logistics. Verified claims from gun camera footage and mission reports included more than 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, and 68,000 trucks destroyed or damaged. While the possibility of duplication in these figures is acknowledged by historians, the scale of destruction is beyond dispute. It was not just material, it was psychological. German ground troops came to dread the sound of the R-2800 radial engine echoing across the fields, a deep, thunderous growl that meant bombs, rockets, and .50 caliber fire were seconds away. The cumulative effect of this constant pressure from above was devastating. German units suffered not only losses in men and materiel, but faced persistent disruption of communications, supply lines, and morale. Air power had become omnipresent, and it wore a Thunderbolt silhouette. As for the fates of the individual captured Thunderbolts, the post-war epilogue reflects a final irony. William Roach's Beetle, serial number 42, Tantanero, which had been captured and designated T9+FK by the Germans, was recovered by U.S. forces at Göttingen in May 1945. After being examined by American technical teams, curious to learn what German engineers had done with the aircraft, it was ultimately scrapped. So too was Lloyd Hathcock's aircraft, serial number 42-75971, which had become T9+LK. It too was recovered, but not preserved. These aircraft had served their purposes in combat, in evaluation, and finally, as symbols of a war that had become not merely a contest of weapons, but a test of who could build, supply, and sustain. The men who flew them lived vastly different fates. Roach, captured in 1943, would survive the war as a prisoner. Hathcock's story diverged in other directions, but their machines, the Thunderbolts, endured as monuments not to perfection, but to something far more decisive in the age of total war: the capacity to build not just one great aircraft, but thousands. And in that lesson, German engineers saw the writing on the wall. They had studied the Thunderbolt, understood it deeply, respected its design, and feared its arrival. But nothing they could learn from it would provide the factories, materials, or manpower they needed to compete. And that, in the end, is the story the Jug told best. William Roach spent the final years of the war behind barbed wire at Stalag Luft Heraus in Barth, Germany. Liberated by Soviet forces in May 1945, he returned home to the United States, one of many airmen whose service had ended not in the skies, but in captivity. Lloyd Hathcock's wartime journey was no less extraordinary. Captured after his mistaken landing at Rome Littorio, he endured 11 months as a prisoner of war, most of them at Stalag Luft III, the same camp that had hosted the now legendary Great Escape just 3 months before his arrival. He was the only African-American pilot among thousands of white prisoners, a quiet yet powerful symbol of the racial barriers that still defined the U.S. military. In January 1945, as Soviet armies pushed westward, the Germans evacuated the camp. What followed was a harrowing winter march, first to Stalag 7A and then to Stalag 13D. Hathcock survived the ordeal and was liberated by Allied forces in April. Upon returning to the United States, he took on a new mission, this time not in a cockpit, but in the long and complex fight for racial equality. He played a key role in the post-war desegregation of the U.S. Air Force and went on to pioneer aerial reconnaissance photography techniques at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, leaving a legacy not only of survival, but of transformation and progress. Hans Werner Lerche, the Luftwaffe's chief test pilot at Rechlin, also survived the war. Over the course of his career, he flew 125 different aircraft types, including many captured Allied models, without ever crashing or seriously damaging a single one. His record remains one of the most extraordinary in aviation history. After Germany's surrender, he provided detailed debriefings to Allied intelligence, offering deep insight into the Luftwaffe's developmental programs. His memoirs, published in 1977 in German and later translated into English in 1980, became one of the most valuable primary sources on the Luftwaffe's captured aircraft evaluation program. They offered more than technical data. They conveyed the inner reckoning of an aviation power grappling with a war it was increasingly unable to win. And therein lies the broader truth that emerges from the story of the Thunderbolt at Rechlin. The P-47's evaluation did more than expose the capabilities of one fighter. It revealed in stark terms the new reality of industrial warfare. By 1943, the outcome of the air war over Europe was no longer being decided by tactical brilliance or individual flying skill. The defining factor was industrial capacity applied at national scale. The war would be won by the side that could not only design and build capable aircraft, but also manufacture them in the tens of thousands while simultaneously producing the trucks, tanks, ships, fuel, radios, rations, and ammunition needed to sustain a global conflict. The nation that could do this, and do it faster, more reliably, and without interruption, would inevitably prevail over one that could not. Germany, by the end of 1943, was locked in an unwinnable equation. It faced enemies whose combined industrial output dwarfed its own by multiples. Britain's resolve had not cracked after the fall of France. The Soviet Union, despite staggering losses, had survived the Wehrmacht's initial assault and had relocated its industry far beyond German reach. And the United States, vast, untouched, and mobilized, had entered the war with an industrial base that eclipsed the Axis powers combined. At that moment, Germany's road to military victory effectively closed. The only question that remained was how long the war would continue and how much destruction it would leave behind. The story of Beetle and the other captured Thunderbolts at Rechlin encapsulates this larger reality. German engineers understood exactly what they were seeing. They studied the aircraft with care, tested them rigorously, documented their findings with professional thoroughness. They knew what American industry was capable of. They respected it, but they could not replicate it. That knowledge could not conjure more aluminum or steel or fuel. It could not restore the railroads crippled by Allied bombing or train a new generation of skilled laborers to replace those lost in combat. It could not rebuild factories or protect convoys. The P-47 Thunderbolt, studied down to the last bolt and rivet, proved one final and decisive truth about modern war: that competent design, multiplied by unlimited material supply and systematic logistical support, would always triumph over brilliance constrained by scarcity. In the end, the Thunderbolt was not a miracle of technology. It was a monument to industrial might, and it helped to write the final chapter in a war where factories, far more than front lines, decided the fate of nations. The most formidable weapon in the American arsenal was never a single aircraft, engine, or bomb, no matter how advanced, but something far more powerful and ultimately decisive: a complete integrated industrial ecosystem. It was a system capable of imagining, designing, prototyping, refining, mass-producing, and sustaining tens of thousands of complex weapons platforms at once. It ensured quality, introduced improvements based on combat feedback in real time, and delivered results with a speed and scale that defied belief. No other nation in the war possessed anything remotely comparable. The captured P-47 Thunderbolts, examined with clinical precision by German engineers, made this truth impossible to ignore. The Thunderbolt itself was not revolutionary. It was practical, robust, and effective. But what it represented was revolutionary. German analysts measured every dimension, recorded every characteristic, and passed their findings through the technical command structure with professionalism and precision. The reports were honest, clear, and thorough, and none of it mattered. Because by the time William Roach's Beetle was under disassembly in a Rechlin hangar in late 1943, its stars painted over with black Balkenkreuz, its panels opened for inspection, the war's outcome had already been sealed, not in dogfights or battles, but in factories. The mathematics were cold and final. The scale of American production, the momentum of its logistics, and the breadth of its resource base meant that no amount of German engineering brilliance or pilot valor could shift the trajectory of the conflict. The Thunderbolt scattered across German airfields, adorned with improvised German markings over fading American insignia, became symbols not of German ingenuity, but of a future that had already taken hold. A future where performance per unit mattered less than total output. A future where versatility, mass, and sustained deployment counted more than any single combat victory. They were reminders that in modern warfare, the decisive factor is no longer the machine itself, but the system that builds it, supports it, replaces it, and makes more of it than the enemy can destroy. In the end, the lesson they delivered was as inescapable as it was devastating. Industrial power, when paired with good enough engineering and sound tactical doctrine, would overwhelm superior but scarce technology every time. And by the time Germany understood that truth, it was already far too late.